to this session, this report session, where we will speak about a survey that we created and conducted in collaboration with the Association of African Universities. In particular, I would like to welcome Nodumo Dhlamini. As I see that she is with us today. We work with Nodumo as she is representing the Association of African Universities. There are our slides. Okay, just to explain a bit about the survey itself. We initially launched the survey back in April, end of April, I think. It was initially created for us to get some data from professionals across institutions across the African continent for the use in a workshop that the team was conducted also in collaboration with the Association of African Universities at the eLearning conference, which took place in late May in Cairo. We decided to extend the survey, and it's finally closed on the 15th of July. At that point, we have obtained 285 responses from 33 African countries. The survey was distributed in 4 languages. That would be English, French, Portuguese, and Arabic. And as I mentioned before, we have been working closely together with AAU around this. And they also helped us to distribute via their very large networks, and which gave us quite a reach to many different, many various African countries, especially in language areas that we had not really previously approached, us as Arabic and French-speaking areas. So helping us with distributing was also the African Virtual University and Saru as well. So the survey itself was 33 questions long, and those were questions addressing perceived needs and skills for successful use and implementation of e-learning in higher educational institutions. We will get a bit closer into that during this presentation. So we are currently still busy looking at the data that we had from it, but we thought that we would just like to share what data we had at this point. To speak about the profiles of the respondents, if we're looking at the gender division, then we see quite a nearly 50-50 distribution, with a slight few more male respondents. Looking at the countries of the respondents, then we had most coming from South Africa, but represented also we had Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana, and Senegal. And we see that especially Zimbabwe and Nigeria and Kenya were quite well represented in this survey. And certainly also to mention that quite a significant group of participants were actually also based in Arabic speaking countries and Francophone Africa as well. Looking at the educational level, and more in this context the academic level of the respondents, then we see that the vast majority have a master's degree, quite a few with a doctoral degree as well. So we see that the survey targeted mainly in the higher education as well, and that also shows in the level of education. Just to show in what sectors that the respondents are from, then we see that the vast majority are engaged, researching and employed in the higher educational sector. We see a few in the government organizations and also NGOs being represented, and hardly any, very few in the secondary and primary education sector. We had another item asking our respondents to their involvement in e-learning, and quite broadly, 60% use online courses for their own professional developments, and we saw that 61% use e-learning for other professional development purposes. 58% research online, and 49% use online resources in their teaching. Addressing those of our respondents who conduct research into e-learning, then we see that just over half of the research use of education technology as a part of their day-to-day work. A third conduct research as part of their postgraduate studies, and 46% research their own online and blended teaching. 36% evaluates e-learning processes as well.
Okay, I'll take over here. Talk about institutional factors. I think what's interesting about the feedback we get about the situation at respondents' own institutions is that it's a combination of the fact that even within an institution, people are located differently and perceive things differently. And then, of course, we also pick up some differences between the actual institutions. So, particularly where the questions are more objective ones, like does your institution support or not support e-learning? Does it have a learning environment, etc.? So in this question, it looks like e-learning, online and blended learning, is a new and growing phenomenon for many of the respondents. 14%, the institution did not offer e-learning. 35% institutions that had started offering e-learning within the last 3 years. And if you go to a conference like eLearning Africa, there's always a new wave of people who are discovering online and blended learning for the first time and going through the same lessons that the more experienced people have learnt 3, 5, 8 years before. And it's the kind of space that's very revealing of what's happening in the broader environment. Then in terms of e-learning strategy, only 39% of respondents could confirm that the institution actually had an e-learning strategy, and 38% said the strategy was in development, which really indicates that institutionally, e-learning is quite a new phenomenon for many African universities and institutions of higher education. Looking at LMS usage, 19% of respondents told us that the institution didn't have an LMS. But what was also very obvious was that Moodle was the most widely used LMS, which confirms a lot of anecdotal evidence out there about the very broad uptake of Moodle across a lot of African institutes of higher education. Then infrastructure support. 41% thought the infrastructure in their institutions provided adequate support for staff and student use, but 28% disagreed or strongly disagreed. And that may well indicate something about the extent of the infrastructure gap. In terms of facilities, the result here was quite an interesting one, and perhaps a little bit puzzling in a way. It suggests a much higher uptake of institutional repositories, and particularly of MOOCs, than you might expect across African higher education from other sources of evidence and from going to conferences, for example. And I suspect that perhaps the sample was self-selected for people who tend towards innovation and perhaps biased towards the more innovative institutions across the continent. Then looking at management support, 75% thought there was support from top management for their local e-learning initiatives, and only 15% disagreed or strongly disagreed. That's quite interesting, the sense that there is real and rhetorical support as perceived by participants. Then, I'll hand over to Jakob for the next section.
Yes. Thank you, Tony. Looking at the skills for successful e-learning, then we see that quite a number points to facilitation as being really crucial for ensuring that an e-learning course actually can take place. We see also in this that the learning design skill and capability of the educator is pointed as being quite important, and also in the ability to create and edit content. It corresponds a bit like we looked at further up, that in involvement that it held quite in high regard that the educators can create and use their own contents. We have a little bit on that a bit later. And looking at skill 4 of the 5 skills that here they were regarded as urgently needed by more than half of the respondents. And looking at that, and then at the top of the list there were learning design, with 78% pointed to that, and the creation of online contents, which was at 74%. So quite a few of respondents have pointed to that as factors really needed within their own institutions. When it comes to professional development, then 61% either agreed or strongly agreed that their institutions allows them enough time for their professional development. And only 22% either disagreed or strongly disagreed to this point. So we see that that on institutional level is perceived good support by management for having e-learning initiatives, and it also looks as if management is actually providing the time for the respondents to develop professional skills in use in that as well. When it comes to access to training, then 63% agreed or strongly agreed that they could access training from within their own institutions, and only 23% disagreed or strongly disagreed to this point. Looking at the perceived skills gap, then we are getting back to a point that we have looked at and mentioned a bit before, that there's a perception that that there is a needed experience in the ability to design blended and online learning activities, and also the ability to create and edit content for use in courses. A bit further down this list we see the ability to create effective digital presentations. And relating at 10.6, we have the ability to create course contents as well, that resemble some of the points above. And quite low on the list, we see that there's only a limited perceived skill set in efficiency in doing online searching and research. Or at least it suggests that that is a skill that is acquired by most of our respondents. In terms of needed skills, then for respondents reporting that as urgently needed or high priority, then training and learning about new educational technologies is at the top. You see it's 75%. And second, on the second place, designing blended and online learning activities, and also to create effective digital content. So once again, that resembles the perceived need of being able to provide and create own courses and contents. In terms of the knowledge needed, indicated as urgently needed or high priority, then the respondents perceived a great need in knowing about technology trends, also knowing about students' digital literacies and abilities to use digital media. And high on the list is also new opened educational resources available. Mobile learning, we see here, is on the list. And the use of learning analytics is also ranked quite highly. And we're also looking at developments in learning theory and developments relating to MOOCs. And gamification comes in on the list as well. There seems to be quite an increased interest in that field as well. Towards sort of the end of the survey, we had a couple of free text items, which meant that we requested the respondents to indicate first of all, what activities that they saw as important to know about through our network and also other networks, and also what they saw as important for or interesting in terms of research studies. Looking at our analysis of that, the learning environment and activities design is the one that comes in quite significantly. So certainly, once again, we've seen the design skill and the ability to create contents and provide contents for own courses as ranked quite highly. We see the new technology trends mentioned as well quite highly. There seems to be a perceived need to know about new learning technologies, new media, and new developments in terms of being able to use that within own courses. Social media integration ranks quite highly. There seems to be a great interest in perhaps not using social media on its own in terms of course activities, but certainly how to use social media in conjunction with the other media. And we see here that things like research skills is mentioned, however not as high as the other topics. And Tony, would you like to take over on this one? My apologies for the...
Okay, Jakob, we'll deal with this. So this is getting close to the punchline, because for Emerge Africa, and I think for our partners, AAU and other partners like AVU and Sarua that helped to distribute the survey, the question is, so what are the takeaways? What are the kinds of issues that need to come into professional development programs for e-learning or edtech researchers and practitioners across African higher education? So what we found was that the focus was very largely on pedagogical issues. And that's encouraging because the respondents were not fixated on technology, although technology also, of course, matters and is a base for making things happen in this space. So things like online facilitation, learning design, assessment models, new pedagogies, effective use of social media, online communication, student digital literacies became really important. African context was also mentioned by a number of respondents. The need for African case studies. I suspect that the reference to MOOCs is partly about the generic use of MOOCs, but also partly about, can we actually afford to sustainably offer MOOCs from African universities? And this is not just from University of Cape Town or University of Witwatersrand, but a wider range of African universities. The technology issues that were raised were new technology trends, mobile learning, using social networking sites, and then the technologies of capturing, creating, and editing course content, which also obviously are related to skills. We don't have a lot to report in terms of the research or evaluation results yet, because there's another free text question which Jakob still needs to finish analyzing, which will give us more clues about the kinds of research interests that people have for potential research seminars, etc. But the kinds of things that came up were, we need training and research skills. Let's learn about learning analytics. And then a hint that perhaps what we actually need is a postgraduate research group across an online professional development network like Emerge Africa. And the evidence for that comes from the fact that 33% of the respondents do their research as part of their postgrad studies. And it suggests quite a significant niche there. Every one of the categories here, African context, technology, pedagogy, and research evaluation, has a plus sign at the end. And what that means is that after distilling what it is that participants in the survey are telling us about what they want and what they know about, it's also up to any professional development network, whether it's going to be AAU or whether it's going to be Emerge Africa, for our own activities, to survey the global literature about the hot and upcoming trends and decide what it is that we should add to the mix. And we're going to be looking at reports like the Horizon Report and others, and thinking about what belongs with the plus in order to spice things up further, in order to extend our horizons, in order to ensure a sharper interaction between the conversations and dynamics in African higher education and the upcoming trends, tools, and possibilities which are surfacing globally as well. I think at this point, it would be good to really thank our partners in the AAU, AVU, and Sarua, and to acknowledge that there were 285 colleagues across the continent who took probably about half an hour each, and in some cases possibly even more, to thoroughly respond to this survey and provide very useful information. And right now, open to questions or comments. Please initially start entering questions or comments in the text chat. And I'll also ask any other colleagues from Emerge Africa core team here if they want to comment at this point. For example, Alice or Nicola, is there anything you want to add at this stage? Okay, doesn't look like it. So let's get any questions or comments that you have in the text chat. Thanks. Yeah. In the planning for Emerge Africa for about the last year and a half, we've been scheming and dreaming about a postgrad support group. And I think the time is right to get one going early next year. This seminar isn't getting the full findings from the survey because there's a whole other section about how participants perceive potential and actual engagement in an online professional development network, which we haven't reported on here, because that's a bit more about the planning of a network like Emerge Africa or online professional activities for other networks. And thank you very much, Nodumo. It's been a pleasure and a huge advantage to be able to work in partnership with you and colleagues in AAU. And I think we're just at the start of that relationship. Is there something that you would like to say? Because if you want to take the mic, you'd be most welcome to do so. Okay. Nelson, good point, fair point. I suspect that there is a tension in the debate about online education because a lot of it's about professional development and postgrad courses, but increasingly there's also a focus on massification. Jerome, can you tell us what you think it says about the state of technology outside of South Africa particularly? I think there's really a question about whether we can go back to the basics. If every African university or institute of higher education that regards itself as reputable and having some depth is moving for blended and online education, then can we really go back to the basics? Because the basics would mean dropping a lot of the technology and dropping a lot of the newer methods. Marie, please tell us a bit more. And Nelson. Ron, you may be correct in lots of instances. It seems that even where the technology is being used, it may not be used very well. And that the sample we have is probably a close to the leading edge sample of professionals across the continent. So this indicates in a way what some of the most dedicated and most passionately engaged people are doing in African higher education. Web learning, I don't know if it's the bleeding edge, but close to or at the leading edge might be more appropriate, because mostly people are talking about the bread and butter tools, not necessarily en masse talking about anything particularly edgy technologically. Looking at Jerome's question, we go back to the skills gap story. There do seem to be very clear gaps and low experience levels in particular areas around not just design, but also some technological skills. And this is even among a self-selected group who are likely to be more active and more informed in the field. And what's coming up time and again is the issue of learning design. It comes up in about 4 or 5 places through the survey. Nelson, it's going to be useful to take advantage of the affordances of online and blended learning, and there will be some benefits. But doing online and blended well is not cost-free. It's probably a bit more expensive than you're imagining at the moment. E-learning is not the messiah that is going to save us from our cost crunches in higher education. Three chairs web learning. It scares me when I step into institutional debates in different places and hear that management sometimes gets that online and blended learning have benefits, but focus almost exclusively on the cost benefits. If somebody here would like to try saying something with their own audio voice and wants the mic, please either indicate in the text chat or use the hands up icon in the menu at the top of your screen. I'd like to reinforce the point Nicola was making here. If you look at the last slide, where a large focus across the entire range of results is about the pedagogy and about how we make this work as educators and how we use the technology effectively as tools, then staff capacity building, professional development is absolutely crucial to making this work. And by the way, one of the results we haven't reported here today indicates that among our respondents, there is a very strong sense of the importance of online professional development in the form of online seminars and workshops, but also online courses for their own professional development. And they regard these as more important than face-to-face training, even though face-to-face is still regarded as important by them. Comment there about the experiential learning required to really understand what it's involved to be in an online course or a blended course, and to think well about the design of such activities. Really, it's encouraging to discover that so many of our respondents are using online courses for their own professional development, because this means that they have that experiential engagement that they can reflect on and draw on, and thinking about what the experience would be like for the people in the online or blended courses that they design and teach. And Nicola, even without a concerted attempt to reduce data costs in South Africa, there's been an explosion in South Africa, and I'm sure across the continent, in the use of mobile devices for online engagement. And it probably is the case that across Africa, there is more internet access from mobile devices than there is from desktops and laptops, and that's been the case for a while. Thanks, Web Learning, for mentioning the articulation with the school system. And we see across multiple questions an interest in mobile learning, mobile devices, designing for mobile learning. It really does feature in this survey. Nodumo, I'm wondering if you have any particular reflections about the preliminary results of the survey at this stage, whether you want to enter a few of your thoughts in the text chat or whether you want the mic. It would be interesting to hear some of your reflections. In this slide here where the same item was repeated twice. So it's very clear that this is about respondents using e-learning for their own professional development. Thanks, Nodumo. Glad there aren't too many surprises here. Nodumo, the results of your survey of Ghanaian colleagues will be really good to combine with the survey that we have here and see if there are consistencies and differences. Great. Don, I don't have any information about that as to whether people are talking about outsourcing. But there did seem to be a very strong interest among the respondents in the survey about developing those skills themselves. Yep, Jerome, there seems to be a tension between the respondents who thought that they had space for doing training and getting professional development opportunities within their own institutions, and those who thought they couldn't access these opportunities locally. And I think that's part of what a professional development network is about. Allowing people access to opportunities that may not be possible locally. Colleagues, we're getting towards the end of the scheduled time for the event. So I want to ask you if in the text chat you can enter some of your ideas, anything that resonated for you with your own experience when you heard some of the results of the survey, anything that surprised you, any other reflections, any closing thoughts. Nicola, if there is interest, I'd be very happy to open a forum for conversation about the survey, and we could just keep the conversation going. And thank you very much, everybody, for the opportunity to present to you, because what it meant was that it pushed us to work faster about getting the survey results compiled and making sense of them. So this will mean that the final report comes out more quickly. I can't give you a deadline for the final report right now, but its progress has been significantly accelerated by the opportunity to speak with everyone here.
Also from my side, thank you so much to all of you participating here. I must say on my own account, it's been a very interesting experience to engage with such a rather large-scale survey, and I'm looking forward to for the team to provide you with some more detailed results of this survey. So thank you all. Like written in the text chat, we will open a discussion forum on our live sites and make that available for further inputs. Thank you all. I'm going to switch off the recording now